So in this video, I'm gonna explain a Raspberry Pi case with a cooling assembly. So here we can see this assembly different views. This is the top view, and from here we have this number 1, which is the Raspberry Pi board itself, this green board, and number 2, this thing is the heatsink, and number 3, this is the fan. Number 4, this is the case for the Raspberry Pi board, and then this number 5 is the lid for this case. Number 6 is actually on the other view, on the bottom side, on the, I would say, the side view of this assembly, where we can also see the bottom, where there is an there is number 6, which is basically the micro SD card, and number 7 is the micro SD card reader, and we also have a power supply. Now let's discuss step by step each component and how what are the functions of those and what are those trying to achieve. So first we start with a computer. So from computer we get data in our micro SD card, and that is through a USB card reader. So a USB micro SD card reader, it's an adapter that lets us plugging in a micro SD card into a computer. So we can plug in our micro SD card into computer, and then it's used to read and write files into the micro SD card. So it can actually hold information. So what information can it hold? Let's go to the other page and see. So this micro SD, this is basically a combination. We can consider it as a combination of hard drive, operating system, and also home folder for a computer. This is kind of an analogy, but in detail, if we try to understand what it does, so the Pi needs it to boot every time it powers on, and it contains the operating system. It will have the operating system, usually Raspberry Pi operating system or Linux, and it also contains the code, programs, data, configuration files for GPIO, networking, etc. So the micro SD card is basically holding bunch of things, and these would be probably the main things that we can remember. And so after we get all the data and information and operating system from our computer using the USB file, that goes to the Raspberry Pi board, which is this green one. So again, what's the purpose of micro SD card? It's storage and reboot device. So we need it to boot our mini computer. So this Raspberry Pi board, this is basically a mini computer, and to boot it we need the micro SD card. And then it goes to the next step, which is the Raspberry Pi. So the purpose of Raspberry Pi board is computation and also control. As I said before, it acts like a mini computer. But how does it actually work? So first, it runs a Linux via the micro SD card. As I said, that the micro SD card will have the operating system. So it runs that operating system, and then it executes the code. So the purpose of code is nothing, just a function that gets some input and computes and provides us some output. So it performs some sort of computation here. And then next, like after getting some output, it use it uses those output to talk to sensors, motors, LEDs, and other hardware through GPIO. So what is GPIO? GPIO, the full form for GPIO is General Purpose Input Output. So Raspberry Pi's way of talking to the outside world is GPIO. So it will have an input, it will have output. So input, it uses the Raspberry Pi board uses the input to read something. So those input information are provided by various hardware. It can be a push button, switches, motion sensors, light sensors, distance sensors. And the Pi reads all these sensors as high or low, 1 or 0. So for example, when we push on a push button, it sends a certain signal, say 1, to the Raspberry Pi board. And here some sort of calculation or computation occurs or takes place, and then it provides an output. So this output goes to the hardware, the output hardware. So the output hardware are those hardware that we want to control. So for example, we can turn LEDs on or off. We can control motors via the drivers, activate relays, buzzers, and the Pi sets the pins high or low. So to summarize, we have this board, which is nothing but a mini computer. So it computes and also it controls. So the purpose of computing is nothing but to control. To control what? Some hardware. So those hardwares, as I provided some example, could be this or anything. And it also takes some input from some hardware. And this hardware, when provides some input, that goes as 1 or 0 to the code that we provide. And this code will execute and it will compute some output, and those output will go to the output hardware. So that's the whole thing. But this computation will, as this computation take place, it would need some power supply because the whole thing needs energy. So that's why we have this number 8, this power supply, which converts AC power to low voltage DC power and provides a stable power supply to the Pi. And as it operates, as it computes and controls the hardware, it definitely generates heat. So we don't want the heat to accumulate, and that's why we use a number 2, which is a heat sink. It basically spreads the heat so that it's not concentrated in a particular location, which can damage the chip. And so it spreads the heat, and this fan is used to dissipate the heat outside. So basically the cooling assembly is used to help us run this the Pi for longer time.